The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marcus Thompson pushed his janitor's cart down the marble hallway of Sterling Financial Tower. His worn uniform and weathered hands told the story of a man who cleaned up after others, invisible to the suits that rushed past him every morning. But what they didn't know was that Marcus owned the very building they worked in. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 28, he was worth more than most of them would see in their lifetimes. Yet here he was, mopping floors at 6 a.m., living a double life that even his own family couldn't understand. Today, however, would be different. Today, Marcus would make a decision that would change not just his life, but the life of a struggling waitress named Emma Rodriguez, who was about to have the worst morning of her year. Emma stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror of her studio apartment, trying to make herself look presentable with the limited makeup she owned. The dark circles under her brown eyes told the story of another sleepless night, spent worrying about her mounting bills and her mother's medical expenses. At 26, she felt like she was drowning in responsibilities that seemed to multiply faster than her minimum wage paychecks. "You can do this, Emma," she whispered to herself, smoothing down her only good dress. A navy blue number she'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. It's just one blind date. Maybe he'll be nice. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sarah. "Remember, meet at Cafe Luna at 7 p.m. His name is David Chen. He's an accountant, wore a blue tie in his photo. Emma had been reluctant to agree to the blind date, but Sarah had been insistent. "You work 3 jobs and never meet anyone," Sarah had argued. "Just give it a chance. What's the worst that could happen?" As Emma grabbed her purse and headed out the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to find out. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was finishing his shift at Sterling Financial. He'd spent the morning listening to executives complain about budgets while he emptied their trash cans, knowing he could solve their problems with a single phone call to his financial advisors. But that wasn't the point. Working as a janitor had taught him more about human nature in 2 years than his MBA from Harvard ever had. "See you tomorrow, Marcus," called Janet, the security guard, as he headed toward the exit. "Have a good evening, Janet," he replied, genuinely meaning it. Janet was one of the few people in the building who treated him like a human being rather than furniture. As Marcus walked to his beat-up Honda Civic, another part of his carefully constructed facade, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Bradley Chen, his college roommate, and one of the few people who knew his real identity. "Marcus, I need a huge favor." Bradley's voice was panicked. "I'm supposed to meet this girl for a blind date tonight, but I just got called into emergency surgery. I'm a resident at Memorial Hospital, and there's been a massive car accident. I can't leave." Marcus unlocked his car and slid into the driver's seat. "Can't you just reschedule?" "That's the problem. I don't have her number. My friend Sarah set it up, and she's out of town at a conference. The girl's name is Emma something, and she's meeting David Chen at Cafe Luna at 7. I feel terrible about standing her up." Marcus glanced at his watch. 6:30 p.m. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only person I know who's free tonight and who I trust not to be a complete disaster. Could you just go and explain what happened?" "Tell her I'm sorry and that I'll make it up to her when I can reach Sarah?" Marcus stared out his windshield at the evening traffic. He'd been planning to go home to his penthouse apartment, order takeout, and spend another lonely evening reading financial reports. The idea of human interaction outside of his janitor persona was both terrifying and oddly appealing. What does she look like? Sarah said she has brown hair and will be wearing a navy dress. She's supposed to be really sweet, just going through a tough time financially. Please, Marcus. I really can't have someone sitting there waiting for me. Against his better judgment, Marcus found himself agreeing. Fine, but I'm just delivering the message and leaving. You're a lifesaver. And Marcus, maybe don't mention the whole millionaire thing. From what Sarah said, this girl has enough problems without feeling weird about money. 30 minutes later, Marcus stood outside Cafe Luna, still wearing his janitor's uniform because he hadn't had time to go home and change. He'd splashed some water on his face in a gas station bathroom and tried to make himself look less like he'd spent the day cleaning toilets, but there was only so much he could do. Through the window, he spotted her immediately. Emma sat at a corner table, checking her phone nervously and glancing at the door every few seconds. She was prettier than Bradley had described, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that she offered to the waitress who brought her water. Something about her posture, hopeful but braced for disappointment, made Marcus's chest tighten. He was about to walk in when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey David, this is Emma. I'm here at the table by the window. Looking forward to meeting you." Marcus realized that Sarah must have given Emma Bradley's number, and since Bradley was in surgery, the call had forwarded to Marcus somehow. Now Emma thought she was texting her actual date. He stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching her through the glass. She kept checking her phone, her smile growing a little dimmer each time. Other couples around her were laughing and enjoying their evening, while she sat alone, playing with her napkin. Marcus knew he should just walk in, deliver Bradley's apology, and leave. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she straightened her posture every time someone entered the cafe, hoping it was her date. Maybe it was the careful way she'd applied her makeup, or how she'd chosen her jewelry. Simple but thoughtful touches that showed she'd made an effort. Or maybe it was because he recognized something in her expression that he saw in his own mirror every morning: loneliness. Before he could talk himself out of it, Marcus pushed open the door and walked toward her table. Emma looked up as he approached, and for a moment, confusion flickered across her face as she took in his janitor's uniform and work boots. "Emma?" he said, extending his hand. "I'm David." The confusion deepened, but she smiled politely and shook his hand. "Hi, David. It's nice to meet you." Marcus slid into the seat across from her, his heart pounding. He had no idea what he was doing, but something about her made him want to find out. "I'm sorry I'm late. Work ran longer than expected." "That's okay," Emma said, though he could see her trying to reconcile his appearance with what she'd been told about her date. "What kind of work do you do?" "I work in a big office building downtown," Marcus said, which was technically true, mostly cleaning up other people's messes. Emma's face brightened. "That sounds important. I work 3 jobs myself, so I understand how demanding work can be." Quote. As she spoke about her jobs, waitressing at a diner, cleaning offices at night, and weekend shifts at a grocery store, Marcus found himself genuinely impressed. This woman was working herself to the bone, yet she spoke about it without self-pity, focusing instead on her goals and her responsibility to help her sick mother. "What about you?" Emma asked. "Do you enjoy your work?" Marcus paused, thinking about how to answer honestly without revealing too much. "It's taught me a lot about people. You see things differently when you're in the background. People show you who they really are when they think you don't matter." "That's really insightful," Emma said, and Marcus could tell she meant it. "I think service jobs teach you empathy in a way that nothing else can." As they talked, Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time in months. Emma didn't treat him differently because of his uniform. She listened to his opinions, laughed at his jokes, and shared her own thoughts with a refreshing honesty he rarely encountered in his real social circle. When the waitress came to take their order, Emma hesitated over the menu, clearly calculating prices. Marcus watched her choose the cheapest item available and felt something twist in his stomach. "Are you sure that's all you want?" he asked gently. "I'm not that hungry," Emma lied, and Marcus knew with certainty that she was choosing based on her budget, not her appetite. As the evening progressed, Marcus realized he was in trouble. He'd come here to deliver a message and leave, but instead, he was having the most genuine conversation he'd had in years. Emma was smart, funny, and kind, in a way that had nothing to do with money or status. She was also clearly struggling in ways that his wealth could easily fix, which created a complexity he hadn't anticipated. When she excused herself to go to the restroom, Marcus sat alone with the weight of his deception. He was lying to this woman about everything: his name, his job, his entire identity. But for the first time in his adult life, someone was getting to know the real him, not the heir to a fortune or the mysterious millionaire janitor, but just Marcus, a man who wanted to connect with another human being. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By the time Emma returned to the table, Marcus had made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He was going to keep being David Chen, at least for tonight, maybe longer. He just had to figure out how to live a double life without destroying the first real connection he'd felt in years. 3 days had passed since the cafe, and Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Emma. He'd walked her to the bus stop that night, watching her count exact change for the fare while he stood next to his deliberately modest car. The contrast between her reality and his hidden wealth had never felt more stark. Now, as he mopped the executive floor of Sterling Financial, Marcus found himself distracted. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Thanks again for dinner the other night. I hope work hasn't been too stressful. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime." Marcus stared at the message, his mop dripping onto the pristine marble floor. He'd been David Chen for one evening, and now Emma wanted to see him again. The rational part of his mind knew he should come clean, but the memory of her genuine laughter and the way she'd listened to his thoughts without judgment made him hesitate. "Thompson," the sharp voice of Richard Sterling, the building's senior partner, cut through his thoughts. "Did you finish the conference room?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, adopting the deferential tone he'd perfected over 2 years of this charade. Richard had no idea he was speaking to the man who owned 60% of the building and could fire him with a phone call. "Good. We've got the Morrison Industries merger meeting tomorrow. Make sure everything's spotless." Richard paused, eyeing Marcus with the casual disdain reserved for people he considered beneath him. "And try not to interrupt. Last time you came in during a presentation." Marcus nodded, biting back the urge to point out that Richard's brilliant merger strategy had a fatal flaw that would cost Morrison millions. Instead, he said, "Understood, Mr. Sterling." As Richard walked away, adjusting his expensive suit, Marcus felt the familiar weight of his double life. These people treated him like he was invisible, never knowing that their entire careers depended on his family's investment firm. It was exactly why he'd started this experiment, to understand the world from the bottom up. But Emma had changed the equation. She wasn't part of his social experiment. She was real, struggling, and deserving of honesty he wasn't sure he could give. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his assistant, Patricia. "Your father called 3 times. The quarterly board meeting is tomorrow at 2 p.m. He expects you there." Marcus cursed under his breath. The board meeting would conflict with his janitorial shift, and he'd already missed 2 family obligations this month. His father, Thomas Thompson Sr., was growing suspicious about his son's sabbatical from the family business. As Marcus finished his shift and headed to his car, he made a decision. He would text Emma back and suggest they meet for coffee, but this time he'd find a way to be more honest, or at least figure out how to navigate the growing complexity of caring about someone while living a lie. Emma received Marcus's text while she was on her break at Romano's Diner, where she worked the morning shift. Her feet ached from standing since 5 a.m., and she had 2 more jobs to get to before the day ended, but seeing David's name on her phone made her smile. "Coffee sounds perfect. I'm free Sunday afternoon if that works." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Dating wasn't exactly in her budget, but David seemed different from the few men she'd met in recent years. He listened when she talked, asked thoughtful questions, and didn't seem to judge her for working multiple jobs. Plus, something about his eyes suggested there was more to him than he let on. "Emma, table 6 is getting impatient," called Rosa, her manager, from behind the counter. Emma pocketed her phone and grabbed the coffee pot, weaving between tables full of construction workers and office employees grabbing breakfast before work. She'd been working at Romano's for 8 months, and while the pay was decent, the hours were brutal. Her shift here ended at 2 p.m. Then she had to rush across town to clean offices until 8 p.m., followed by grocery store shifts on weekends. As she refilled coffee cups and took orders, Emma's mind wandered to her mother's latest medical bills. The cancer treatments were experimental and expensive, not fully covered by their basic insurance. Every dollar Emma earned went toward keeping her mother alive and comfortable, leaving nothing for herself. "Excuse me, miss?" An elderly man at table 3 waved her over. "Could I get some more cream?" "Of course," Emma smiled, grabbing fresh cream containers. The man reminded her of her grandfather, and she always had time for the older customers who came in alone. "You're very kind, dear," the man said as she set down the cream. "Not many young people take the time to be genuinely nice anymore." "Everyone deserves kindness," Emma replied, meaning it. Her mother had taught her that treating people well cost nothing but could mean everything to someone having a difficult day. As Emma continued her shift, she didn't notice the well-dressed man in the corner booth watching her interactions with customers. Victor Castellanos, a real estate developer known for his ruthless business practices, had been observing the diner for weeks. The building Romano's occupied was in a prime location, and Victor had plans that didn't include a neighborhood eatery serving working-class families. Sunday afternoon arrived, and Marcus found himself more nervous than he'd been for any business presentation. He'd chosen a small coffee shop in Emma's neighborhood, partly because it fit his janitor persona and partly because he wanted to see her world. As he waited outside Brewster's Coffee, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of his work uniform, he spotted Emma walking down the street. She wore a yellow sundress that brightened her whole face, and she moved with purpose despite the obvious fatigue in her shoulders. When she saw him, her smile was genuine and warm, making Marcus's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "David," she called, jogging the last few steps. "Sorry I'm a little late. The bus was delayed." "No problem at all," Marcus said, fighting the urge to offer her a ride next time. His car was modest, but even that might raise questions about a janitor's budget. They found a quiet table by the window, and Marcus bought their coffee, watching Emma protest when he refused to let her pay. The gesture seemed to genuinely surprise her, which told him everything he needed to know about how she'd been treated by men in the past. "So tell me about your week," Emma said, wrapping her hands around her mug. "Did your boss give you any trouble after our date? I know some employers can be weird about personal time." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. If only she knew that he was technically everyone's boss. No trouble. Just the usual corporate drama. "What about you? 3 jobs must keep you exhausted." "It's manageable," Emma said, though Marcus could see the toll it was taking on her. "My mom's treatments are going well, and that's what matters. Plus, I'm saving up for something special." "Oh? What's that?" Emma's cheeks reddened slightly. "It's probably silly, but I've always wanted to go to college. I have applications for night classes starting in the fall. Business administration. I know it'll take years while working, but I think I could actually make something of myself if I had the education." The hope in her voice was infectious, and Marcus found himself leaning forward. "That's not silly at all. What kind of business interests you?" "Maybe something in community development, or helping small businesses. I see so many good people struggling, and I think there might be ways to make systems work better for everyone, not just people who already have advantages." Marcus stared at her, struck by the irony. Here was someone with more natural business instinct and genuine care for others than most of the MBA graduates he knew, and she was cleaning offices at night to afford community college applications. "I think you'd be incredible at that," he said, meaning every word. Their conversation flowed naturally from her dreams to his thoughts about social inequality, something he'd observed firsthand from both sides of the economic divide. Emma listened intently when he talked about workplace dynamics and seemed to understand nuances that surprised him. "You know," Emma said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, "you talk about business stuff like you really understand it. Are you sure you're just a janitor?" Marcus's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. You just seem to know a lot about how companies work, management styles, that kind of thing. Maybe you should consider going back to school, too. You're obviously smart enough for anything you want to do." The suggestion was innocent, but it hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here was this incredible woman, encouraging him to better himself, not knowing he already had everything she was working toward and more. The weight of his deception felt heavier with every passing moment. "Maybe I will," he said quietly. As they prepared to leave, Emma's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went pale. "I'm sorry, I have to take this. It's about my mom." Marcus watched her step outside, her body language growing more tense with each word. When she came back in, tears were threatening to spill from her eyes. "Emma, what's wrong?" The treatment center called. "Insurance is denying coverage for my mom's next round of treatment. They're saying it's experimental and not medically necessary, but without it." She took a shaky breath. "The doctor says she has maybe 3 months." Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him. Here was a problem his wealth could solve instantly, but he couldn't offer help without revealing everything. The frustration was overwhelming. "How much would the treatment cost?" he asked carefully. $80,000, Emma whispered. "I might as well ask for $1 million. There's no way I can get that kind of money." Marcus's mind raced. $80,000 was what he spent on a single dinner at exclusive restaurants. It was less than he'd paid for his watch. But to Emma, it might as well have been impossible. "There have to be options," he said. "Financial assistance programs, maybe loans." "I've tried everything," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "My credit isn't good enough for a loan that size. And we don't qualify for most assistance because I technically make too much money with 3 jobs. It's like being punished for working hard. As Marcus walked Emma to her bus stop, his mind was already formulating plans. He couldn't solve her problem as David the janitor, but maybe he could find another way. The question was whether he could help her without destroying the trust they were building. That night, as Marcus sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to his private investigator, asking for a complete background check on Victor Castellanos and any threats to businesses in Emma's neighborhood. The second was to his lawyer, inquiring about anonymous charitable donations and medical assistance funds. Marcus Thompson had spent 2 years observing life from the bottom up. Now, for the first time, he was going to use his position at the top to make a real difference in someone's life. He just had to figure out how to do it without losing the woman who was rapidly becoming the most important person in his world. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the conference room of Thompson Industries, but this time he wasn't hiding behind a janitor's uniform. Wearing a tailored navy suit, he addressed the board of directors with the confidence that came from finally living as his authentic self. The Community Development Initiative has exceeded all projections, Marcus announced, clicking to the next slide of his presentation. We've provided microloans to 47 small businesses, funded 12 community college scholarships, and our partnership with local medical centers has covered treatment costs for over 200 patients. His father, Thomas Sr., nodded approvingly from the head of the table. The numbers are impressive, son, but more importantly, the community impact aligns with our company values. Marcus smiled, thinking of how those values had been shaped by a woman who was currently finishing her first semester of business school with a perfect 4.0 GPA. After the meeting, Marcus walked through downtown, no longer invisible in his janitor's uniform but carrying the lessons those 2 years had taught him. He stopped at Romano's Diner, which now bore a small plaque by the door. Community Partner, Thompson Industries Community Development Initiative. Inside, Emma was behind the counter, but now she wore a manager's badge and was training 2 new employees. Her face lit up when she saw him, just as it had that first night at the cafe. "Mr. Thompson," she said with mock formality, "fancy seeing you here." "Just Marcus," he corrected, as he always did. "How did your strategic management exam go?" "Aced it," Emma grinned, untying her apron. "Professor Martinez said my business plan for expanding community dining programs was one of the best she'd seen." Marcus felt a surge of pride. Emma had thrown herself into her studies with the same determination she'd once applied to working 3 jobs. With her mother's treatment fully covered by the Thompson Foundation's medical assistance program, Emma had been able to reduce her work hours and focus on school. "Rosa said I could take my break," Emma continued, grabbing her jacket. "Want to walk?" They stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, falling into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over the months since Marcus had revealed his true identity. It hadn't been easy. Emma had been hurt by the deception and needed time to trust him again. But she'd also understood his motivations and recognized that the man she'd fallen for was real, regardless of his bank account. "I got the internship," Emma said as they walked toward the small park where they'd had their first honest conversation. Marcus stopped walking. "The one with the mayor's office?" "Community Development Coordinator. It's exactly what I want to do. Helping neighborhoods grow without losing their character, supporting local businesses, making sure development benefits everyone." Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I start next month, and it'll count as credit toward my degree." "Emma, that's incredible," Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. "You're going to change this city." "We're going to change it," she corrected. "Your foundation's work gave me the framework I needed for my proposals. Plus, having a boyfriend who actually understands municipal budgets doesn't hurt." They found their usual bench overlooking the city skyline. The view reminded Marcus of the night he'd sat in his penthouse, planning how to help Emma without revealing himself. Now, sitting beside her as she reviewed notes for her urban planning class, he marveled at how much had changed. "I have something to tell you," Emma said, setting down her textbook. "I've been thinking about what comes after graduation." Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness. They'd talked about the future in general terms, but Emma had always been focused on finishing school first. "I want to start my own consulting firm," she continued, "helping small communities and businesses navigate development opportunities. But I want to do it right, making sure people aren't displaced, that local voices are heard, that growth benefits everyone." "That sounds perfect for you," Marcus said. "You've seen how development can go wrong, and you understand what communities actually need." Emma turned to face him fully. "I want you to be my partner. Not just romantically, but in business. Your experience with corporate finance, my background in community needs, we could actually make a difference. Marcus stared at her, struck by the elegance of the idea. You want to go into business together? I've been watching how the Thompson Foundation operates, seeing how you've changed your family's company culture. You understand that business success and community benefit don't have to be mutually exclusive. Emma took his hand. What do you think? I think, Marcus said slowly, that it's the best idea I've ever heard. As the sun set over the city, they talked through the possibilities. Emma had already been sketching out business plans in her spare time, identifying underserved communities that could benefit from thoughtful development. Marcus could provide the financial backing and corporate connections, while Emma brought the community perspective and genuine understanding of what working families needed. There's one condition, Emma said as they prepared to leave the park. What's that? No more secret identities. If we're going to change the world together, we do it as ourselves. Marcus laughed, remembering the man who used to hide behind a janitor's uniform. Deal. Though I have to admit, cleaning offices taught me more about business than my MBA ever did. That's because you learn to see people, Emma said. The janitor thing was never about pretending to be someone else. It was about becoming who you really are. A year later, Rodriguez-Thompson Community Partners had offices in 3 cities and a waiting list of communities eager for their services. Their approach was revolutionary in its simplicity. Listen to local needs, involve residents in planning, and ensure that development created opportunities for everyone, not just developers and investors. Marcus stood in their conference room, looking at the wall of photos showing completed projects, a revitalized shopping district that kept local businesses while attracting new investment, affordable housing that preserved neighborhood character, a community center that served multiple generations. Each photo represented families whose lives had been improved rather than disrupted by change. Emma entered the room carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing the engagement ring Marcus had given her the previous month. She'd said yes immediately, joking that she'd known he was the one when he showed up to their first date in a janitor's uniform and treated her like she mattered. The Henderson Neighborhood Project got final approval, she announced, setting down his coffee. Construction starts next month. That's fantastic, Marcus said, pulling her close. Your presentation to the city council was brilliant. Our presentation, Emma corrected. I couldn't have explained the financing structure without you. They worked in comfortable synchronization, reviewing contracts and community feedback. Marcus marveled at how naturally they complemented each other, his analytical skills balancing her intuitive understanding of human dynamics, her creativity inspiring his strategic thinking. The phone rang, interrupting their work. Emma answered with her professional voice, then broke into a grin. That was Sarah, she said after hanging up. She wants to know if we'll cater our engagement party with food from Romano's and if we can find a good accountant for her friend Bradley. Apparently, he's finally ready to start dating again. Marcus laughed, thinking of his friend who had inadvertently set everything in motion with one canceled blind date. Tell her we know just the guy. But maybe this time he can make it to his own date. As evening approached, they locked up the office and walked home together through the neighborhood they'd helped revitalize. Streetlights illuminated families enjoying the new community garden, local restaurants bustling with dinner crowds, and children playing in the upgraded playground. Do you ever miss it? Emma asked as they passed the Sterling Financial Building where Marcus had once worked nights as a janitor. Miss what? Being invisible, having that secret perspective on the world. Marcus considered the question seriously. I learned everything I needed to learn. How to see people who are overlooked. How to listen to voices that aren't usually heard. How to understand what really matters. He squeezed her hand. Besides, I found something better than being invisible. What's that? Being seen by the right person. Emma stopped walking and kissed him under the streetlight, right there on the sidewalk where rushed executives used to ignore a janitor pushing his cart. Now those same executives nodded respectfully when they passed Marcus on the street, but their acknowledgement meant nothing compared to the love in Emma's eyes. 6 months later, they stood at the altar of the small church where Emma's mother had been married 30 years earlier. Emma's mother, fully recovered and radiant in her mother-of-the-bride dress, dabbed at her eyes as her daughter exchanged vows with the man who had proven that love could transform lives in ways that money never could. Marcus looked into Emma's eyes and spoke the words he'd written himself. "You saw me when I was invisible, loved me when I was lost, and showed me that the greatest wealth is having someone to share your dreams with. I promise to build a life worthy of your trust and a love that grows stronger every day." Emma's response brought tears to everyone's eyes. "You taught me that circumstances don't define us, that kindness matters more than status, and that the best partnerships are built on truth and mutual respect. I promise to dream big with you and never forget where we came from." Quote, as they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, Marcus thought of the young man who had stood outside Cafe Luna 2 years earlier, afraid to be himself. That man could never have imagined that pretending to be a janitor would lead him to the woman of his dreams and a purpose worth living for. Their reception was held at Romano's Diner, transformed for the evening but keeping its essential character. The guest list included everyone from board members to night shift security guards, city councilors to community college professors. It was exactly the kind of celebration Emma had envisioned, bringing together all the different worlds they'd touched and creating something beautiful from authentic connections. As they danced their first dance, surrounded by the people whose lives they'd changed and who had changed theirs in return, Marcus whispered in Emma's ear, "Ready to change the world, Mrs. Thompson?" Emma smiled, her eyes bright with possibilities. "Ready to change the world, Mr. Rodriguez Thompson." Together. And in a corner booth, Janet, the security guard, sat next to Bradley the doctor, both of them smiling as they watched the janitor and the waitress who had found their fairy tale by being exactly who they were meant to be. The following spring, Marcus and Emma stood before the groundbreaking ceremony of their largest project yet, the Riverside Community Complex. The abandoned warehouse district that had been slated for luxury condos would instead become affordable housing, small business incubators, and a community college satellite campus. 3 years ago, I was cleaning these same buildings, Marcus told the gathered crowd of residents, city officials, and investors. Back then, I thought wealth meant having power over others. Today, I understand that true wealth means empowering others to achieve their own dreams. Emma stepped forward, her confidence radiating as she addressed the community members who had fought alongside them for this vision. This project exists because you believed your voices mattered, because you refused to be displaced by progress that didn't include you. Every apartment, every classroom, every small business space was designed with your input. The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus watched Emma with deep admiration. She had evolved from a tired waitress counting bus fare to a respected community leader whose phone rang constantly with requests for consultation. Yet she still remembered to ask the diner's busboy about his night classes and slip extra tips to servers working double shifts. After the ceremony, they drove to the cemetery where Emma's father was buried. It had become their tradition to visit him with major news, Emma talking to the headstone while Marcus listened respectfully. "Daddy, I wish you could see what we've built," Emma said, placing fresh flowers on the grave. "Marcus reminds me of you sometimes. The way he listens to people, really listens. The way he believes everyone deserves dignity." As they walked back to their car, Marcus reflected on how much his relationship with his own family had evolved. His father now sought his advice on corporate social responsibility, and his mother had become Emma's biggest champion, bragging about her daughter-in-law's achievements to anyone who would listen. "I have news," Emma said as they reached the car, her tone carrying an excitement that made Marcus's heart skip. "Good news or great news?" he asked, using their private code. "Life-changing news," Emma replied, pulling a small envelope from her purse. "I got into the graduate program at Columbia. Full scholarship for the Master's in Urban Planning with a focus on community development." Marcus stared at the acceptance letter, his chest swelling with pride. "Emma, this is incredible. Columbia's program is legendary. The best part is it's designed for working professionals. I can keep running our business while studying. They want me to develop a case study on our community-centered development model." "You mean our model is going to be taught in graduate schools?" Emma nodded, grinning. "From Romano's Diner to Columbia University, not bad for a girl who used to count bus fare." That evening, they hosted a dinner party in their brownstone home, a restored building in one of their revitalized neighborhoods. The guest list reflected their journey. Rosa from the diner brought her famous tres leches cake. Thomas Sr. and Marcus's mother arrived with champagne. Janet brought her new boyfriend, and Bradley came with his latest girlfriend, a pediatric nurse he'd actually managed to meet without standing her up. As everyone gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories and laughter, Marcus marveled at how their lives had become beautifully intertwined. These weren't just business associates or family obligations. They were chosen family, people who had supported each other through struggles and celebrated each other's victories. "A toast," Thomas Sr. announced, raising his glass, "to Marcus and Emma, who proved that the best business strategy is simply caring about people." "To second chances," added Bradley, winking at Emma, "and to friends who show up even when you don't." "To dreams that become reality when you work hard enough," Rosa contributed, her eyes bright with emotion. Emma stood, her own glass raised. "To everyone who believes that where you start doesn't determine where you finish, and that the most powerful force in the world is people choosing to lift each other up." As they clinked glasses, Marcus felt a completeness he'd never experienced. His penthouse apartment had been impressive but cold. This home, filled with laughter and genuine affection, felt like the life he'd always been searching for without knowing it. Later that night, as they cleaned up together, Emma paused while washing dishes. "Do you think we would have found each other eventually, even without the blind date mix-up-us?" Marcus considered the question while drying a plate. "I think we were both becoming the people we needed to be to recognize each other. You were working toward your dreams despite impossible circumstances. I was learning to see beyond surface appearances. Maybe the universe just gave us a nudge at the right moment." "I like that theory," Emma said, leaning against him. "It means we were always meant to be partners." As they turned off the lights and headed upstairs, Marcus caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirror. Emma in her favorite sundress, himself in jeans and a casual shirt. They looked exactly like what they were. Two people who had found each other across different worlds and built something beautiful together. The last thing Marcus saw before sleep was the framed photo on Emma's nightstand from their first official date, not as David the janitor and Emma the waitress, but as Marcus and Emma, ready to face the world as themselves. In the photo, they were laughing at something he'd said, both of them glowing with the joy of finally being seen and understood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more communities to serve, more dreams to build. But tonight, listening to Emma's peaceful breathing beside him, Marcus knew that the scared young man who had hidden behind a uniform was gone forever, replaced by someone worthy of the extraordinary woman who had chosen to share her life with him. Their love story had begun with a lie, but it had grown into the most honest thing either of them had ever experienced. And that, Marcus thought as he drifted off to sleep, was the most beautiful truth of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.